Good morning, everyone. It is a pleasure to welcome you all to our two-day event on entering German market for Lithuanian life science companies. Today we will focus on pharma, biotech, and cell and gene therapy companies, and tomorrow we will dedicate the sessions to the medical devices and digital health applications. My name is Aurelia, and I am co-founder of Ambio Health Tech, and together with Enterprise Lithuania, we are very pleased to bring these resourceful webinars to your attention today and tomorrow. For those who are not familiar with Ambio Health Tech, we are a platform and consultancy that supports life science startups and organizations in their efforts to commercialize ideas and products. Working extensively together with our broad international expert network, we provide two types of services. Firstly, for startups, we offer tailor-made consultations on important milestones, such as regulatory approvals, go-to-market strategies, and so on. We also have launched certification-ready and fundraising-ready packages that can help startups achieve the goals in a more efficient way. Secondly, for organizations, we offer skill-building events, masterclasses, acceleration programs, and so on to really support innovators in the life science industry. All right, but before we start, I would like to quickly brief you on today's program. So we will kick off with Gregor Kemper, Associate Chemicals and Healthcare at German Trade and Invest Agency. Gregor will tell us more about why Germany is such an interesting and attractive market for life science companies, and how German Trade and Invest can help those willing to expand to Germany. At 10 a.m., we will continue with Professor Xavier Luria from DDR, who will tell us more about centralized regulatory requirements by European Medicine Agency. We will have a short break around 10:45, and after that, at 11 o'clock, Professor Luria will continue his presentation, deep diving on the local decentralized requirements for life science companies willing to enter Germany. At 11:45, we will break again, and finally, for the last hour of the event, Dr. Matthias Schoenemark will tell us more about the German market access, price negotiations, and reimbursement procedures. Importantly, at the end of each presenter session, there will be time for your questions. So please type them on the Facebook chat and we will read them to the presenters. Also, please don't forget that you can register for individual consultations with the experts in case you have some burning questions about your own German market entry strategy. So you can do that also following the link on Facebook. All right, so let's get going. And it is my pleasure to introduce to you Gregor Kemper from German Trade and Invest. Welcome, Gregor. Please, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to the session on the German healthcare markets. And I'm going to share my screen. Here it is. Well, Aurelia, thank you very much for the kind introduction. As you said, my name is Gregor Kemper. I'm in charge of the biotech and pharma industries at Germany Trade and Invest at our investor consulting department. And here's what I would like to talk about today. First, I'm going to give a brief summary of the German healthcare market in general, some statistics mostly, and hospitals in Germany. Then a quick brief excursus on COVID-19 and what German companies have contributing and how especially public initiatives have been interfering with and supporting the healthcare related industries in Germany during the pandemic. After that, I'm going to go into a bit more detail on the individual healthcare related industries. Firstly, about the biotech and pharma industries, the one which I'm mostly affiliated with, and then with the related medtech, diagnostics, analytics, and finally digital health industries. At the end, I'm gonna talk a bit about how you can benefit from this healthcare ecosystem, and for example, how to set up a subsidiary in Germany, some very brief information, and which incentives could be available for an initiative like this. And in the end, there'll be time. I'd be happy to try to answer any questions. Well, first about the German healthcare market in general. Healthcare expenditure in Germany overall is 400 billion a year, which equals 11.7% of the GDP. And this percentage is relatively high. It's not as high as the USA, but it's still one of the highest worldwide, especially by European standards. Pretty much everyone in Germany has health insurance. There's a dual system with public health insurance and a private health insurance. The majority of people is in the public health insurance. I'm going to go into a bit more detail on that on the following slide. There are almost 2,000 hospitals in Germany, 500,000 hospital beds, 385,000 physicians, 2,000 pharmacies, and the overall workforce in the healthcare sector is 7.5 million people. Now, I already said here's some more information on health insurance. The system is that there is a public health insurance for everyone. So for, especially for employees, their family members, and also retired people. And this is the default option for health insurance. People who are above a certain income threshold can opt to get privately insured, privately insured instead, which is the case for a bit more than 10% of the inhabitants of Germany, and about 88% are in the default public health insurance. There are about 44 private and 105 public health insurances in Germany. Hospitals in Germany can have 3 types of ownerships. They can either be publicly run, so basically managed by, for example, the local municipality, or charity-based, that means they're run by a non-for-profit organization, in many cases the church, or private. Today, the distribution between these 3 types of ownerships is roughly 1/3 to 1/3 to 1/3. But interestingly, this was not always the case. If you take a look at the graph on the right, you see that private for-profit operating hospitals used to be pretty uncommon, but became more and more common in the past years. And now that they are actually the most common type of hospital in Germany. Who knows, perhaps this is going to continue. What's interesting is that the ownership types of hospitals is regionally differently distributed. If you take a look at the map on the right, you see that charity-based hospitals are especially common in the west of Germany, in, for example, North Rhine-Westphalia, Rhineland-Palatinate, and the Saarland, whereas private hospitals are more common, especially in northern Germany. Another important aspect of the German hospital landscape are hospital companies or hospital groups, which encompass a number of different hospitals and also clinics and different centers for healthcare all across Germany. And the 2 largest of them are the Helios clinics and the Asklepios clinics, which together have over 60,000 beds, which is more than 10 or 15% of the hospital beds in Germany in total. So they are really an important factor. The largest hospitals in Germany are, of course, the one in large cities, for example, the Charité in Berlin and the LMU clinic in Munich. But there are also other ones that are not necessarily in the largest cities, but that are university hospitals of important universities. And this is why, for example, the University Clinic of Heidelberg, despite Heidelberg not being that huge, is actually the 3rd largest hospital of Germany. Now, what does the future for the German healthcare market look like? An important driver of the future growth that is to be expected is, of course, the aging society. It is estimated that the percentage of people in Germany who are aged at least 65 years, which is already relatively high today, is going to be 29% in 2030 and even 34% in 2060. And of course, more elderly people also tend to have higher medical needs, more need for medical products and services, and also, for example, more care dependency. The number of people in Germany who are dependent on medical care is expected to increase to up to 4 million until 2050. So here again, this is going to be an important driver of need for products and services. And another important factor are chronic diseases. They already make up 80% of German healthcare spending as of now. And if you take the example of diabetes, the people in Germany suffering from diabetes mellitus has risen from 5.8 to 7.2 million people within 14 years. So here also there has been some growth in recent years and a rapidly expanding market. Now about COVID-19, this is just a quick excursus due to current recent events. You've probably heard of the German German labs vaccine development projects. BioNTech and CureVac both developed mRNA vaccines. BioNTech partnered with Pfizer and now got their product on the market. CureVac recently announced their collaboration with Bayer and are currently in clinical trials with their mRNA product. Now there's a third vaccine developer in Germany, IDT Biologica in Dessau, who is a bit less known. They are developing an MVA vaccine. They're at the moment also in clinical development. And apart from their work and their own vaccine, they are also active in the production and fill and finish of the vaccines of other international companies, such as AstraZeneca and Johnson & Johnson. There has also been quite a bit of diagnostic development in Germany during the pandemic. For example, Roche Diagnostics has a site for the development and production of diagnostics and also antigen tests in Penzberg, Bavaria, where they developed a rapid and accurate antibody test for COVID-19 last year. Now, at this site, they had made previously a couple of substantial investments, partly in combination with funds from the Bavarian government. And well, I guess you could say these investments paid off. Now, one reason why the German government could react pretty quickly when the pandemic broke out and soon released funds for research and development was that there was already, from a couple of years ago, a research program dedicated to research on zoonotic infections, so infections that can be transmitted from animals to humans. And this research program also contains some funds that would be released in case of a pandemic or epidemic emergency, which was, as we know, the case when COVID-19 broke out. And this way, a call for research applications could be issued rather quickly, rather early in 2020. In addition to that, the CEPI that conducts international vaccine research also received an additional grant from the German government. Now, actually, financially, as I said, the government was pretty heavily involved in the development of vaccines. For example, the three vaccine developers that I mentioned earlier, BioNTech, CureVac, and IDT Biologica, received, all the three of them together, 750 million euro to firstly, of course, accelerate the development of the vaccines and the clinical trials, and also to prepare for, once they would be approved, for the production of the vaccines in order to accelerate this whole process. Also, since early last year, about a year ago, there were talks about a possible acquisition by an international investor of CureVac, which motivated the federal government to purchase a 300 million euro stake in the company, which is something that did not usually happen before. So this is a bit of a new development that has been pretty much caused by the pandemic, that the federal government gets much more financially involved in private companies, which is a new development, which can, of course, also lead to opportunities. In addition to that, as I said, the CEPI, the Committee for Epidemic Preparedness Innovations, received 140 euros in order to promote worldwide vaccine development. Now, diagnostics were also an important point. There are reasons to assume that the demand for diagnostics against COVID-19 is going to, or is currently increasing. There's just no data yet, so it cannot be quantified. But the two factors, the two reasons for this are that, firstly, in February this year, the sale of antigen tests for lay people, for non-medical professionals, has been permitted in Germany. And it became possible for companies to obtain an accelerated approval for these lay people antigen tests. The first couple of approvals, most of them for international companies, have already been granted, and these tests can now be sold, for example, in pharmacies and drugstores. Furthermore, testing centers have been set up pretty much everywhere. There's just one or two down the road from where I live, and these testing centers offer free tests for pretty much everyone. And of course, this is quite a huge demand that needs to be covered for antigen tests and point-of-care diagnostics against COVID-19. Now, in order to meet this high demand, the government set up a production incentive. Now, I have to add this call for incentives, this call for applications ended by now, but I think it's just another important example of showing how there has been much more intervention in the economy by the government than it had been previously seen. For example, in this incentive program, companies that produce point-of-care tests could receive up to 30 million euros. There were in total 200 million dedicated earmarked for this program. It could cover 30% of eligible costs and even a bit more on top if the raw materials for the diagnostics were sourced from the European Union. In 2020, the large investment program and the economic relief program has been released, totaling almost 10 billion. Well, 10 billion dedicated to the healthcare sector, to healthcare-related objectives. 4 billion went to public health, and especially the public health offices in Germany, which of course bore quite the brunt of the work of, for example, contact tracing and all these additional tasks that arose due to the pandemic. Also, 3 billion euros were to be dedicated to the modernization, especially of the digital infrastructure of hospitals in Germany. And then there's 1 billion for the safety of the pharma and medical supply chain. The reason for this was that after the outbreak of the pandemic, some countries, like especially India, an important exporter of pharmaceutical products, limited or halted the export of some anti-inflammatory drugs. So some people in Germany worried about the safety of the supply with some essential drugs, such as, well, anti-inflammatories and also antibiotics. And this is why 1 billion is supposed to be spent on domestic, well, German or EU pharma production. However, it's not yet sure how exactly this money is going to be spent. Well, let's wait and see. It's not yet sure how what this program is supposed to look like. Now, next, about the biotech and pharma industry. First, about the pharma industry. Well, Germany is, as you could expect, the largest pharma market in Europe, but it's also a pretty dynamic one. Here you can see that the growth rates of the German pharma market in 2019 were, well, of course, not as high as those of China, but it's still one of the fastest growing pharma markets within Europe, especially in the European Union. Germany is also a location where, especially compared to other European countries, the investments in pharmaceutical research and development does not stagnate or even decrease, but is actually growing quite rapidly. So there's an association of German pharma companies that conduct research, and they are really quite active in this space in drug development, which is of course also a stimulus for the biotech industry. Because medical biotechnology is, of course, the source of many of the innovations that the pharma industry needs. Here are some statistics on the German biotech industry. Revenue and also R&D investments have been growing pretty steadily. There are a bit more than 800 companies, also steadily increasing, and the workforce of the biotech industry is about 50,000 people. Now, this includes the entire biotech industry. So this is a medical biotechnology that are dedicated to research and development, mostly of therapeutics and diagnostics, and also basically non-specific bioservices, and also a few companies that are active in the space of industrial or agricultural biotechnology. But the majority of this is really medical biotechnology. Now, you maybe you saw on the last slide that I didn't have any data for the last years for financing. So here is some more data on financing, which is of course an important factor for pre-revenue biotech companies. Here you can see that in the past couple of years, financing in biotech companies in Germany usually went up. There's a bit of an upward trend, especially for venture capital, as you can see in blue. 2018 was a bit of a unique year because there was one individual transaction for Acquiagen that made this year particularly high. And well, 2020, I didn't put it on the charts because the numbers were just too high. Due to the pandemic, there was so much interest, and the biotech industry, biotech drug development companies were so much at the center of attention that the numbers were far higher than anything the biotech industry had seen before, especially because BioNTech and CureVac, the two mRNA developing biotechs, went public, which caused the overall revenue from IPOs in that year in the biotech industry to be above 2 billion. But if you take a look, it was not just that. Also, the venture capital in that year, over 900 million euro, was more than twice of what you would usually have expected. An important aspect of the German biotech landscape are innovation clusters. They are basically local aggregates, local accumulations of biotech expertise, consisting of course, biotech companies, but also universities and other stakeholders like associations. And here's a map of what this roughly looks like. These clusters can be quite different in nature. Some of them are essentially like technology parks, which provide not only infrastructure, which can be helpful, especially for biotech startups. If they need, for example, some lab space, they can get it pretty easily there. But they also provide an environment where there's, for example, events for startups to provide them with business knowledge or whatever the connections that they need in order to transfer a good scientific idea to a viable product that can make it on the market. Others have in particular links to academic research or to the pharmaceutical industry, or create links between them to promote translational research. Some of them are more like communities for their members to exchange ideas, and some have dedicated research foci. So, for example, in Jena, you have the cluster Infectognostics, which is especially interested in infectious diseases and therapeutics and diagnostics for these infections. So sometimes you have this concentration of a very particular expertise. Now, since I heard some of you might be interested in cell and gene therapy, there are also some centers of expertise about that. One important one is the Fraunhofer ITSI, the Institute for Cell Therapy and Immunology, which is in Leipzig. Another important one, of course, an important factor in cell and gene therapy is oncology. And one of the main bodies of research, apart from the NCT in Heidelberg, is the DKFZ, the German Cancer Research Center, which is not located at one particular location, but spread across several locations across Germany. Also in Frankfurt, there's the Löwe Center for Cell and Gene Therapy. And in Hanover, at the Hanover Medical School, there is the Rebirth Cluster. Now, this is basically just a list of some, a non-exhaustive list of some locations I found that can be interesting. And of course, the Paul-Ehrlich Institute, which is the authority in Germany that is in charge of approval of biomedical therapeutics, which also includes, of course, cell and gene therapy, also performs their own research, and they're also themselves active in the in the cell and gene therapy space. Also, the fact that in Germany biomedical assets, biomedical products are approved by the Paul-Ehrlich Institute can be seen as an advantage, because they have the nice habit of processing them pretty quickly. So here you can see the maximum allowed processing time and how long it actually takes. They usually stay below that, and only about half of the processing time is time that is actually spent by the PEI processing the applications. The rest is used by the applicant. Now about the medical technology industry. The overall size, volume of the medtech market in Germany is about 35 billion euro. A bit less than half of that is medical devices, and about half is what we call Hilfsmittel, medical aids. Medical aids are, for example, orthopedic devices that are just used by the patient. For example, these kind of special socks or bandages that you can put on the feet in order to keep it steady after an injury. And a small segment of it is dressings. Germany actually has the highest number of medical technology patent applications in Europe. By the way, the same also applies to biotechnology. What's interesting about the medical technology sector in Germany is that, firstly, there's a lot of companies, 12,000, so it's really quite a stunning number. But the vast majority of these companies is actually very small. 90% has less than 20 employees, and even out of the 10% that have more than 20 employees, most have less than 50. So this is really, as it is actually a bit of kind of typical for many industries in Germany, very much dominated by small companies. There are also clusters in medical technology. Here you can see some of them, a map of the largest aggregations of medtech companies in Germany. There are some, of course, in the usual metropolitan centers, metropolitan areas around Berlin and Cologne, for example. But there are also some particular ones, for example, in the Erlangen-Nuremberg area in Bavaria. You have quite a lot of really strong manufacturing companies in the medtech space. And in the not so large town of Tuttlingen in the southwest, you have a real, well, quite a local stronghold, a local powerhouse of medtech industry, for example, also dental materials, dental equipment, these kind of things. All in all, there are more than 30 of these clusters in Germany. Now, about in vitro diagnostics, Germany is, again, the largest market in Europe with a market volume of over 2 billion. And the diagnostic industry in Germany employs almost 25,000 people. Now, this is only for diagnostics. On top of that, there's also what we call the life science research industry. So this is the industry that produces products and services that are not dedicated to diagnosing diseases on patients in a clinical setting, but that are just for research applications. And if you add these, that's again 15,000 staff on top. The market size of these two together is 4.5 billion. And again, here you have a large percentage, 90% of the companies in these sectors that are small and medium enterprises. This is to a very innovative industry sector. 13% of the revenues are invested in R&D, which is not that far away from what you know from pharma, for example, and biotech. And according to a survey from 2019, so this was still before Corona, 45% of them planned to expand their R&D operations in Germany. Now about digital health. For a long time, Germany had the reputation of being a bit, well, conservative about digital health because people wanted to see a real doctor. But now, due to the pandemic, no, actually already before the pandemic, this has been changing. The process has just been accelerated by COVID-19. And in the past years, since 2018, there have been some regulatory changes which really accelerated this process and enabled physicians to use digital applications in healthcare. Here are some of the changes. First, the electronic health record is now a thing in Germany. And so the idea is that patients, well, medical data is stored and can therefore be more easily exchanged, for example, between general practitioners and well, specialists that they have to see. So the exchange of information gets a lot easier between the different people who are who take part in healthcare. Furthermore, teleconsultations, so basically seeing a doctor without being physically there will be strengthened. This type of consultation has already become vastly more popular due to Corona, of course. And now it's also possible for doctors to actively advertise the fact that they offer teleconsultations. For example, they used to not be able to say this on their website, but now they can actively advertise this. Finally, for companies that carry out healthcare research, especially public health research, it's possible to access anonymized patient data for their research. And an innovation fund was set up to fund general innovation in healthcare, which is, of course, a field which especially digital health benefits from, which is equipped with 200 million euro per year. Now, what's the digital health applications? Here are the formal requirements for a DIGA. It's categorized as a medical product of class 1 or 2A under the medical device regulations. Now, the main function relies on digital technologies. Okay, this is kind of intuitive, but I just have to clarify it. Now, the intended user, one might say the main user, is supposed to be the patient. So it's basically an app that is used by the patient, but that can, and in many cases will, also have an interface with the doctor. And possible product functionalities are detection, treatment, palliation, abatement of pain, compensation of diseases, injuries, or disability. Now, how to get these DIGAs into the German market? Here's a chart that roughly shows how the procedure works. First, the developer submits an application to the BfArM. Now, the BfArM is in Germany the authority that is responsible for the approval for drugs and medical devices, except, of course, biomedical drugs. Now, the BfArM will examine this application. And now we have to distinguish between two kinds of requirements. First, there are the basic requirements, safety, quality, functionality, privacy, and data security in blue here. And they will check if these requirements are fulfilled. And if any data about positive effects of positive care effects of this DIGA, this application, is available, they will revise that too. And if both are found to be present, if the requirements are met, and if positive care effects are scientifically proven, the DIGA will be listed in the DIGA directory, which means that it can be reimbursed directly. So this is actually pretty easy path. If there is no data on positive effects yet, it is possible to list it for 12 months as a preliminary listing. And during this testing phase, the developer has to gather data on whether this application is effective. And if this is the case, if this is proven in the end, it will be permanently listed in the DIGA directory and permanently reimbursed. Now, here was some information on the different industries that make up the healthcare market in Germany. Now, how can you benefit from it? And how can you, if you want to do business in Germany, for example, set up a company there, like an affiliate, subsidiary? What are the options? Now, Germany Trade and Invest has a lot of information on that. I'm going to give you a little bit now, but I'd be happy to answer any further questions later. Now, the options to establish an entity, an office, for example, in Germany are basically two. You can either set up a subsidiary, which is often a limited liability company, like a GmbH, or a branch office. Now, the difference between them is that the subsidiary is basically independent. So it manages its own business, writes and pays its own bills, all these things, whereas the branch office is still attached to your main office. So it's not independent, but much of its business has to be operated through the head office. Now, I think that in most cases, if there are actually any growth plans, a subsidiary is usually the better choice. Unless, for example, if you're in a very niche market and you don't expect to grow a lot for quite a while, then there might be a business case to start with a branch office. Now, how to set up a limited liability company? As I said, this is pretty much the default option to to start a presence in Germany, the first thing to do is to write the Articles of Association, which is basically the contract on which the company is or the subsidiary is based. Then make a notary appointment and basically have these Articles of Association notarized. After that, you can set up a company bank account and deposit the initial share capital, which has to be at least 25,000 euros for the company. And once this has happened, the company will be registered by the notary. It can be entered in the commercial register, and also the trade office has to be notified of the establishment of the new business. Now, how about incentives? There are some instruments that can help, especially biotech companies that are research intensive in succeeding and financing, especially their early operations. There's one new instrument called the Research Tax Credit Act, or VSULC. The gist is that companies that are active in developing new products, that in carrying out research and development, especially risky research and development, can get 25% of their expenses, so especially salary expenses for R&D staff, reimbursed on their tax bill. So this reimbursement is currently capped at 2 million. So at expenses for a maximum of 2 million. But due to the COVID-19 relief package, this was doubled to 4 million until 2026. So you see, in Germany, this is really a law that is aimed especially at facilitating research and development for small companies that don't spend billions on R&D, but that just have R&D cost up to 2 million a year. By the way, this can actually also be dedicated to basically partly financing money that was paid to CROs, but only 60% of the fees paid to contract research organizations can be taken into account for this law. The process for this is that there is some kind of state agency where companies can submit their research proposals, their research plans, and get a certificate over the eligibility under the Research Tax Credit Act. Also, there are investment incentives. The most popular one is the GRW program. Its availability varies regionally. So basically, you see the map of Germany there on the right, and the bluer it is, the higher the incentives you can get. And how it works is that companies can apply to this prior to the investment. This is important. So it has to be applied for before the actual investment starts. It applies to basically most business activities, but not for sales. So it's got to be, for example, production, research and development, something like this. And it can cover up to 40% of the expenses, so of the invested sum. How much exactly it can be, which percentage exactly it is, may depend on the size of the company. So the smaller the company, the more. And as I said, the location where in Germany it is. There have also been, as I already mentioned earlier in the section about COVID-19 and current developments, there have also been programs related to COVID-19. For example, there was a program to establish production facilities for masks and the one about diagnostics that I mentioned. Now, at the moment, I think there's none of these programs running anymore, but it shows that in a dynamic situation such as the COVID-19 pandemic, there is a certain new willingness, I have to add, of the German government to actually expend funds to promote companies that are willing to set up production facilities for certain really needed goods. So this may lead to some opportunities for companies that act fast. Now, how can Germany Trade and Invest help you with that? Basically, what we do is we have industry teams. For example, as I've said, I'm in charge of biotechnology and pharma at the chemicals and healthcare teams. Also, I have colleagues that work, for example, with care in general or medical devices, and usually digital health. And we also have cross-sectional teams that are specialized on questions that affect all industries, such as legal or tax issues or incentives. So with this, we can basically provide quite a wide variety of information that can help international companies that are interested in the location Germany to, well, firstly explore the location and find out if there's a business case to expand into this market, and then of course provide information on how to do this that makes the step into a new country a bit easier, provide country-specific information, as I said, more details on how to set up a GmbH, on the tax system. What we can also do, and what I can say we're pretty good at, is finding a suitable location. So based on a company's needs, on whether they need, a large space for a factory or just a small office somewhere, based on their location requirements, we can find a good city in Germany and then create contact with our local counterparts in the respective federal states in order to consult you through the further steps. So, great. So here are my contact data. If you're interested in that, if you have further questions about the location Germany, you can feel free to contact me. And of course, if you have any questions now, we still have some time, 20 minutes. I'd be happy to answer some questions now.
Thank you so much, Gregor. It's extremely useful information that you share, really. Let's see if we have any questions for you. I don't see it so far, so maybe while people hopefully typing their questions, I have a question to you actually. So I loved your presentation on clustering, especially because I think that's really a great way to leverage the concentration of talents and resources, and really in this way you can speed up the developments of life science products and technologies. I have actually two very basic questions probably, but I just got curious about it. So are these clusters actually specialized in certain technologies or certain therapeutic areas? And if yes, I wonder how does it work if, for example, a startup would like to join one of the clusters? Are there some kind of, I don't know, selection procedures, or is it more simpler than that you just pay a rent and you get the access to the office and infrastructure? Do you have more information on that, just practically how that works for a startup?
Actually, great that you ask. Yeah, actually, we've got a publication on that. It's called Fact Sheet Biotechnology Clusters, and it's basically a map of biotechnology clusters in Germany. And the new 2021 edition of this publication also contains, well, not only information on where the clusters are located and what they're called, but also on what they're active in. So it's basically like a table with different spaces of mostly drug development and also other areas that they can be active in. For example, some indication groups, oncology, infections, whatever, and others, molecular biology, cell biology, all these things. And we asked all the clusters to tick the boxes, which ones they are most active in. Mm-hmm. And okay. Actually, I can just show it to you for a second what it looks like.
Sure, I think I am very curious. That would be great.
While this is loading, okay, here it is. Okay, this is taking a while to load, but while this is loading, I could already tell how to basically establish contact with them. I've had situations before where startups actually asked me about this, and essentially they work like technology parks, so they basically have usually lab space for rent. It's not always that easy to get into them because they might have just no lab space left. Some are just pretty full, but I mean, if you could keep looking, usually you'll find some place. Yeah, I mean, usually it's a bit like finding a flat, finding an apartment, just a bit easier. So it's basically like applying, and that's it. Here, now I might be able to
Do
show
you
that.
agree with my idea that, for example, for a foreign startup moving to Germany, this could be also strategically a wise way to actually enter the market? Because then if you manage to get a place in a cluster like that, you are immersed in all this dense concentration of talents and skills and contacts and network.
Yes, I think that would be a good. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, I think that would be a good idea, especially, of course, if what you're planning is R&D. I mean, then you would also have the right facility and the right infrastructure, and not have to build up a lab from the ground, but already have a good starting point. And yeah, even if it's something apart from R&D, even apart from like the physical infrastructure issues, of course, it's nice that in some of these clusters, you'll also be embedded basically in an environment where there are already other clusters. For example, just as an example, here in Berlin, there's one cluster, and they're going to organize an event called Biennale this month.
Oh, yes.
Which is basically also a nice occasion, I think, to just get contacts, meet people in the German biotech area. And yeah, this is
so it's useful also for networking, really. And when you are new in the company in the country, I think that's also super important to be exposed to all the network and contact.
Yes, I think that is mostly the advantage of it.
Yeah. Okay, were you going to share something?
Yeah. Yes, I was actually looking for it, but I kind of here it is. There it is. Now this I just would like to show what it looks like, and if anyone is interested in it, I'd be happy to send it over.
Please, that would be really cool as well. I think then we can.
Why doesn't it open?
Distribute to those who are interested.
It usually works. There it is. So the key part is, do you see this now?
Yes, you can see.
Okay, so this is on the left here. You can see the map of where the clusters are, and in the middle and right part, you see this table of the different clusters in the left column, and then here the different areas of fundamental research, drug development in different indications, and also novel therapy approaches like cell and gene therapy, personalized medicine, etc. So I think this could be helpful to basically find the cluster that's interesting for you.
Extremely. I think it's super cool. Also, great job to map it like this. Super useful.
You're welcome. Yeah, and also some of the clusters are basically like federal state level biotechnology organizations. For example, in Saxony there's BioSaxony, in NRW there's BioNRW that create a bit like a community and connect the different players of the biotechnology industry in this federal state.
Amazing. I see we still don't have any questions from the audience, so if we have time, I'll shoot another one, because I'm grateful for your presentation. I think you gave a lot of very useful insights, and I was wondering about the you mentioned the Research Tax Credit Act and incentives for R&D companies and reimbursing of 25% of the expenses. Do you think this applies also to foreign companies that open an affiliate in Germany, or is it purely just Germany-based headquartered companies?
No, the headquarters doesn't have to be in Germany. The important point is where the research, basically where the research staff pay their income tax. So basically, it can be applied, as far as I know, to all salaries that are paid to your R&D staff in Germany. And for the CRO cost, it's not even that strict. I think it can also be applied to CRO if your CRO is just in the European Union, but not in Europe. That's okay. But I suppose in this case the actual office, so that the company that pays the fees has to be in Germany. There, I'm not entirely sure, but I mean that what I can definitely tell you is that this credit also applies to German subsidiaries of foreign companies.
Okay, that's also very useful. So in case a company is outsourcing a CRO to another country, but the company is based in Germany, they can still claim this.
Yeah, as I said here I'm not exactly sure, because I've read that it can also be applied to other EU CROs, but of course this way like companies from abroad could just easily game the system. I'm not sure how this works, but this is how it generally works.
Yeah, very useful.
Glad you liked it.
Yeah, I had another comment actually that I wanted to share with you. So thanks for really providing this beautiful overview of different components of German life science industry, and for touching upon DiGA and digital health reimbursement procedures. So I just wanted to say that tomorrow we dedicate an entire hour or two during the second part of our webinar series to really tackle exactly this topic of DiGA and digital health reimbursement procedures. So also I'm using this moment just to remind the viewers for whom it is relevant that we should, that they should connect tomorrow for that, to deep dive more into the topic. But as you said, Gregor, it's something that is really, in one way, also thanks to COVID, sadly, but efficiently we are moving forward on that, and I think it's very great that you brought it into the picture today as well.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, this is actually something that is, as I said, Germany has not had a reputation of being very very fast to adapt these things, but now it's both administratively and also in terms of how it's received by patients, moving forward more and more quickly.
Exactly. It takes time to also educate end users and doctors, and also have the incentives. And having the incentives, I think, can really speed up.
Yeah, that too. Yeah.
I have a question from our audience. So Olivia is asking, can foreign company register for the research tax credit eligibility if we provide services to German companies?
In this case, I mean, if a foreign company would be like the CRO, they don't have to specifically register it. Just if it's located in the European Union and a German company uses their services for a fee, they could they could claim the tax credit on that. In this case, the CRO doesn't have to do anything.
Okay. So it's actually up to the company that is registered.
Yeah, right. It's basically, I remember that around the turn of the year, so like December, January, I saw the first job applications of these agencies that were looking for people to basically review applications for certificates. So I suppose that around this time they should be starting to receive these applications and hand out certificates to certify that someone's research and development projects are eligible under this Research Tax Credit Act, and yeah, this way they can be claimed. So yeah, this is all done by the company that carries out the research. I mean that gave the orders for the research.
Yeah, I see. I understand. Any other questions for the audience? Because we are almost about to finish the first part. Gregor, how can people find you? So how can people get in touch and get your, and should they find you? Should they directly write you or call you? Or do you think your colleagues would take care of certain other topics? Can you tell us more about how to get and leverage this opportunity of German Trade and Invest?
Actually, there are different ways. Of course, you can use the contact data that I showed earlier to contact me directly, especially if it's a project for related to pharma and biotechnology. What is also possible is we've got a contact form on our webpage, gtai.com, where people can basically say what they're looking for, and my colleagues will direct you to either to me or to the colleague who is in charge. And we also have international offices in a lot of different places all over the world. Also, for example, in Warsaw, Moscow, and Stockholm. And yeah,
not in Lithuania yet.
I'm sorry, but maybe soon. Yes.
Well, we have, you know, that I was telling you earlier, we have so many interested people connected today. So, you know, the demand is there, definitely interest is there. So who knows, maybe for you, it's also another way of, you know, expanding to Lithuania.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Perhaps. Yeah. But as I said, that the system is you can basically contact any of these ways. So foreign offices, gtai.com or me directly, and it will usually always end up on the desk of the project manager who's in charge of the respective industry.
Great. Great. All right. So I think if there are no more questions, then I have to thank you. Thank you for sharing this great overview of what's going on in Germany. And it's definitely, you know, we were not mistaken by choosing Germany as the topic of today for Lithuanian life science companies to move to that place, because there are a lot of opportunities. There are a lot of also incentives and possibilities to actually, not only for local companies and startups, but also for foreign ones to
yeah.
move there.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Well, thanks for inviting me. It was a pleasure speaking here.
Thank you. Pleasure is ours. And I hope we stay in touch. And please send us the report as well of the cluster so we can share with those who are who are interested.
Okay, great. I'll do.
Thank you. So I ask you to disconnect, and then we can continue with the following
Goodbye.
speaker. Thank you, Gregor. Have a good day. And now we will talk about market access, price negotiations, and reimbursement procedures. It is my pleasure to introduce to you our next speaker, Dr. Matthias Schoenemark, who is the founder and managing director at SKC Beratung. He is trained as a head and neck surgeon, holding a PhD in molecular oncology, and has a broad experience working in the healthcare industry, from being a professor at different international medical universities to really a diverse senior consulting positions, where he has supported medtech and pharma companies on different topics such as strategic management, innovation management, and others. So today, Dr. Schoenemark will tell us about German market access, price negotiations, and reimbursement procedures. And I would like to remind everybody that in case you would like to have an individual consultation with his team, please register on the same link on Facebook, and we will arrange that for you. So, Dr. Schoenemark, I'm very glad to welcome you and look forward to your presentation. Please, stage is yours.
Thank you, Aurelia. It's a pleasure and great honor to be with you here this morning. It's still morning here in Germany. The topic is complex. I try to make it as decomplex as possible, and I'll definitely try to leave some space and some time open for questions. Even though it's complex, it's also pretty logical because it's a German procedure, and you'll, you know, it's also something that a manifestation of German culture and of German, the way how Germans think about legal regulation, and therefore it's there are quite some differences to other European countries. But I think you'll learn also something about this. The company that I represent is SKC. SKC was founded 18 years ago with a colleague of mine who is now my wife. We came from BCG, the Boston Consulting Group, where we learned the consulting trade. And before that, as Aurelia just told you, I had a clinical career. What we do, we consider ourselves still a boutique, market access and strategy boutique with a team of now 36, 37 people, and a strong network specifically into clinical sciences and regulatory affairs. And we're based here in Hanover in the northern part of Germany, but work for international companies throughout the globe, and educate them and help them to understand the EU pharma markets, and specifically the German market. Our mission is that we help, in the end, patients. We help our clients that patients with difficult diseases do have access to a treatment, to innovative treatments, and that as many eligible patients as possible are treated with an adequately reimbursed new product. So this is because I'm a surgeon by training. This is also a little bit of my physician's legacy. Our specifics are orphan diseases and orphan drugs, ATMPs, and all other drugs where we see a new treatment paradigm, or other tricky issues like repurposed drugs or generics that now come back to the market with a new area of treatment, and therefore pose difficult challenges to pricing and reimbursement. You wouldn't see us necessarily in a Me Too DPP4 inhibitor for diabetes, the number 20 on the marker. So that's nothing that is of interest to us. We're really focused on the innovative drugs, on drugs that are very much on the frontier of modern medicine, and also dealing with issues that are very, very specific, where we need to crack some nuts. What do? We do everything from very early on market access strategy, then the specific parts of benefit assessment, where you will learn a little bit in a minute, strategic pricing, and we also do price negotiations, because everything has to be in German, and it's sometimes very difficult for non-native speakers to really move effectively in this German landscape. We also work for venture capitalist companies to do strategic due diligence, if they're for targets, and evaluate the market access perspectives. For instance, we support our clients in stakeholder management, and we are getting more and more interesting requests for digital pharma issues and digital health, which follow and will follow a very similar logic in the German market. We work for large pharma, big pharma, as well as very boutique one-product companies, startups, and also some specialist pharmas focused on orphan drugs or on one treatment area, for instance. Okay, and we published, and that is available to you for download. You can contact me or my company. We published 2 recent reports on orphan drugs in Germany, and also market access for gene therapies in Germany, and they are available. So just give me a call. Okay, I think you learned a little bit about the German pharma market already, so I can rush through this. Germany is attractive. It's the most attractive market in the EU. Why? Because it's the biggest market. It's the 4th biggest or 3rd biggest market, I guess, in the world, after the US and Japan. Obviously, we'll see China coming up and India coming up, but Germany is big with 47 million US dollar turnover per year, and it's growing, as you see on the right-hand side. But it's not growing in all segments. It's only growing in pharmaceuticals and biopharmaceuticals, diagnostics, homeopathic. Drugs are shrinking, and in the pharmaceuticals, it's the innovative, it's the patent protected pharmaceuticals that grow. Generics are not growing. We do have, which is important to know, we already have one of the highest generic penetration rates internationally, with almost 80% of the drugs in Germany prescribed are generics, and we'll come to that. Pharmaceutical costs are already the 2nd largest sector in the health insurance system, with that they outpaced, so to say, the physicians, the outpatient physicians' costs. The 2nd largest sector, the hospital, obviously is the largest. And you see on the right-hand side that the prices for pharmaceutical costs are going down over the years, specifically in the last 2 years. And you see this heavy drop, which is due to the VAT, the value-added tax, which was adjusted in Germany, which was lowered to support the economy due to the pandemic situation of COVID-19. So prices are under pressure in Germany. The costs go up, but the system tries to regulate the prices, and we'll see how they do it. However, if we look at the largest treatment areas, most of them are reigned by generics. You know, obviously it's analgetics, it's beta blockers, it's ACE inhibitors, it's diuretics. So for the chronic diseases, because there's so many people, 82 million people in Germany, you know, these are still the biggest blocks due to just the size, but it's not the prices. It's all generics, but we see that the largest blocks here. The overall healthcare costs are growing steadily, and this is costs per inhabitant in euro on the left-hand side. And then total healthcare costs on the right-hand side. So we see a very, very steady increase, which is not halted, it doesn't flat out. However, the industry likes to use this diagram, because they say, well, if we look at the proportion to the gross domestic product, it stays more or less the same. So we don't see you know, we were just growing as the gross domestic product. However, you can imagine that if the gross domestic product drops, which is the case in 2020 and which will be the case in 2021, that the proportional part of costs, of healthcare costs, and specifically of pharmaceutical costs, will have a steep increase, because unfortunately our industry also got hit pretty bad. And this is why there are very strong and increasing political pressures to reduce or to control costs even stronger. And we'll see, this is my expectation, more cost containment measures in maybe already this year. We have election year, but very early next year, we'll see more to come for, and this is no good news for the pharmaceutical industry. How is it controlled? One part is market access and price control, and I come to that, but there are also others, very effective measures, and this is tenders for mostly generic drugs, and we'll see that almost 60% of all packs that are sold, that are prescribed, are controlled by tendered prices and rebates, and it makes up to close to 40% of the entire costs of the entire turnovers are already controlled by tenders that are given out from the insurance companies. Specifically for orphan drugs, Germany is still a very, very attractive market. Why? Because in Germany, you know, you can be very, very fast in the market. It's 1.3 months delay to get into the market or to be there and get paid for after market approval by the EMA. And we see in other European countries it's much longer. It takes 19 months, more than a year, 1.5 years in France, for instance. And also, if you look on the right-hand side, in Germany, most of the orphan drugs that have an approval are on the market and are accessible and are paid for by the German insurances. So specifically for orphan drugs, we're in a very good situation. We are first in class, at least in Europe, if it comes to access, availability, and market penetration of orphan drugs. This also should be, or I was told, should be a part of my talk, and I come to the orphan drug specifics later on as well. And as I said, we're very fast. So if you look at market success, even after 3 years after launch, which is the third column, you see the years in the x-axis, more than 80% of patients, of the patient population, has access or is treated, you know, is the market penetration. And after 5 years, we see on average 100% of the forecasted, the anticipated market to be served by the orphan drug. So this is very, very effective, specifically, as I said, for orphan drugs. For non-orphans, it's a little bit slower. And this is because there is an established standard of care, and to establish a new standard of care in a non-orphan situation is slower. And as I said, if you consider 80% generic penetration, then physicians are hesitating to prescribe new and more expensive drugs because they have the pharmaceuticals budget, and they should not overrun this budget. So therefore, there are different levers of cost control within the system that slow the market penetration down. It's important to understand that we have a statutory health insurances, which is also mandatory. So everybody needs to be insured, and 80% of all patients, of all inhabitants, are covered by the statutory health insurance. It was founded more than 140 years ago, or almost 140 years ago, by Bismarck. It was a political measure. And health insurance is one column of the social system in Germany, and it's paid by the insurer and by the employer. So both split the costs, the premiums for the health insurances, and we have 90% of all inhabitants covered by the statutory health insurance, and 10% are covered by private health insurances. We only have a very, very small percentage of patients who are not insured, because you have to be insured in Germany. Only if you're pretty rich and have a high income, you can get you can exempt from the mandatory health insurance. So it works since 140 years, and also this is also why the legal context is pretty complex. I didn't expect that your German is pretty good, but that's the German social code. That's the beginning of the social code number 5. And the social code number 5, the acronym is SGB5, is the important social code. And here there are some things that are important to understand, because it's the underlying philosophy of the market access in Germany, that the insurance may only pay, may only invest, may only spend the money of the insurees for effective measures, so measures that work, that reduce symptoms or heal, or prevent a crisis or a deterioration of the clinical situation, for measures that are necessary. So the insurances do not pay for so-called lifestyle drugs like Viagra, and for measures which are efficient. I put cost-effective here in brackets because we do not have a clear health economic system like the UK, where you have to do cost-effectiveness models, but they need to be efficient. And the underlying philosophy, and that's extremely important to understand, the underlying philosophy is that everything that comes additionally into the market as an innovation needs to, and if it wants to be, if this product wants to be more expensive, so use more resources than the standard of care, it needs to be better. So an innovation per se may not, may not use more resources. You will be benchmarked, the product will be benchmarked against the current standard of care, because the political idea behind it is that our healthcare standard in Germany is already world-class. It's already extremely good at a high price, or at high costs, clearly. Higher costs are not acceptable because half of it is paid by the employers, and we don't want to traumatize our industry. So therefore, we have to be careful with our resources, and everything that comes into the market and is more expensive needs to be better than the current standard of care, better in terms of efficacy. And this is the philosophy. If you understand this, you understand 90% of the German system and the German market access system. We're well organized. There are a lot of organizations that play a part. The central organization is the Gemeinsame Bundesausschuss, which is the Federal Joint Committee. I come to that in a minute. Then there are provider organizations on the left-hand side from the Hospital Association, from the insurance, the umbrella organization of the statutory health insurances, and the providers, the physicians. On this, the private health insurances also play a role. There are a couple of institutions that are arranged around the GBA. The GBA is controlled by the Department of Health, but it considers itself independent. And the GBA is supported by two institutes. One is the infamous IQWiC, covering the ambulatory medicine, and then the ICTIC, which covers and oversees the inpatient, the hospital medicine. And you'll hear more from the IQWiC because they cover pharmaceuticals as well. And as I said, the GBA is very, very powerful. It's directly under the ministry, while the ministry, the Department of Health, they, build the legal framework, and then the GBA uses this framework, and within the framework designs directives, and the directives are then mandatory have to be followed by the players in the system. The GBA consists of a plenum of some sub-departments, a pharmaceutical subcommittee, for instance, but the central decision-making body is the plenum, consisting of 5 representatives from the statutory health insurances, 5 representatives from the providers, i.e. hospitals, physicians, and dentists, and 3 independent members, 3 impartial members with 1 chairman. And you can imagine that very often there's a draw between 5 and 5, and then the impartial members, they make the decision, and so they are very, very important. Patients are there. There are 5 patient representatives, but they do not have a vote. They have a voice. They don't have a vote. And people say, well, there is a governance issue because the insurances, they are often one block, and on the provider side we do have trade-offs between ambulatory and hospital medicine. This is an ongoing political discussion, but as it stands, and it has been like that for decades, this is the decision-making body. So the GBA is the gatekeeper. The GBA is the stairway to heaven or the road to hell, if it comes to pharmaceutical costs or in pharmaceutical prices. How are they doing this? Well, it's the acronym is the AMNOC, which is the acronym for the actual legislation. And the AMNOC is a very structured, very transparent procedure that takes 12 months, regularly 12 months. How does it work? On the day of the launch is when you make your product commercially available through pharmacies in Germany. I'm only talking prescribable drugs. You need to submit a dossier to the GBA for a benefit assessment, for an initial benefit assessment. What is in the dossier? I come to that in a minute. You start on the market with a free price. You can set the price completely freely, and it will be paid by the insurances, but only for 12 months. Now, the clock starts ticking, and the GBA starts looking at your dossier, where you have all your scientific data compiled, looks at the dossier. Sometimes for non-orphans, it delivers it to the IQWiC, and the IQWiC makes an assessment. And after 3 months, this assessment is published. So the IQWiC could say, we do see an additional benefit against a comparator, which is the standard of care. You find the underlying philosophy again. Or the IQWiC or the GBA would say, no, we don't see an additional benefit. The new product is not better than what we already have. Then there is a period of another 3 months where you can react, and all interested parties, which could be the scientific community, the clinical societies, the competitors, the trade associations, the patients also, could react to this initial published benefit assessment, say, we do see it differently, or you make a mistake here, or we'd like to put something in context, or you could deliver more data to the GBA. And then there is a very, very important 90 minutes in the entire process. The most important 90 minutes is the oral hearing. So you, as a pharmaceutical manufacturer, go to the GBA, to the plenum, and there's a Q&A session, and you defend your position and try to improve your situation, to heal if the IQWiG said we don't see an additional benefit. The GBA comes to a resolution and publishes its final resolution 6 months after launch, precisely 6 months after launch. Then the GBA is out of the game. So you either have an additional benefit or you don't have an additional benefit, and additional benefit in different categories. I come to that. Then the second phase starts, which are price negotiations with the umbrella organization of the insurances. And through 4 or 5 appointments, which are now online, normally they take place in Berlin, 4 hours each. Some phone calls, over a period of 6 months, you try to negotiate the actual price, the reimbursed price, which will be effective from the first day of the 13 months. So for the period that comes after the 12 months free pricing, this is the price which is officially listed and which the insurances pay for your product. And these pricing negotiations are pretty intense, and you try to make your case. There are a couple of influencing factors that I discuss with you. If you do not come to terms with the GKVS fee, then there is the opportunity for legal action. You trigger an arbitration procedure, which takes another 3 months, and then the arbitration board the arbitration board then sets the price. If you do not have a price fixed by a negotiation, by a contract, the arbitration board will say, okay, this is the price and we think this is fair. If you don't think that this is fair, you can take it to court and take legal action, which could take another 2 to 3 years. But what is clear, whenever the decision is made, whenever a price is set, it's effective from month 13 onwards. So even if if the arbitration board sets a price, or if there is a price which will be confirmed by court, you have to go back. It works retroactively, and you have to pay back to the insurances from beginning month 13. So we see 4 different phases. It starts with a scientific phase, a methodological phase, a little bit of a technocratic phase, because professionals looking at your data. Then there is this political arena at the GBA hearing where you discuss things, you try to bring your arguments in a proper rhetoric structure, and all stakeholders are there, and you try to get the GBA to I wouldn't say manipulate, but try to influence the GBA that they make a decision in favor of you with a higher benefit assessment or benefit category. And then there's the deal-making procedure, and then there is the legal procedure. Okay, so during this different, you'll get the slides, so you can look this up. I don't take you through all the details. During this procedure, specifically this political procedure, there are a lot of stakeholders around, and they need to be prepared. They need to be managed. Patient advocacy groups need to be managed, that they are, if they, also not manipulated, but maybe influenced. If they are waiting for this new drug and say, we do want it, there is a high unmet need, this needs to be managed. Or the clinical societies, for instance, saying we need this new error in our arsenal. We need this product, for instance, in epilepsy, because we still see refractory epilepsy patients, and we need a new drug, etc. So this needs to be managed, and it needs to be managed to the very, very point, which is the oral hearing. Okay, so as a pharmaceutical manufacturer, you need a interdisciplinary approach. You need an integrative model of different competencies that need to be arranged. Medical, you need health economics, you need governmental affairs, epidemiology and care research, regulatory affairs, product management, sales, marketing, legal, obviously, regulatory, R&D. So all of them need to be organized for this procedure and along this procedure, which is partly of what we do for our clients and support them there. So everything is then will be public. You know, the AMNOG dossier will be published after 3 months. So whatever you put in there will be published, and it's on the GBA website. You can download it. The benefit assessment by the IQWiG and the GBA will be published. The verbatim protocol of the hearing will be published. The written statements from the different sides and stakeholders will be published. And also the final decision will be published. So very, very transparent procedure. The dossier is super structured. There is a template that is also downloadable with different, it's arranged in different modules. Module 1 is the executive summary. Module 2 is pharmacokinetics, pharmacodynamics, mode of action, basically. Module 3 is current standard of care, because this is the benchmark in Germany for the costs and also for the efficacy. And module 4 then is a compilation of all your efficacy data coming out of your studies, pivotal studies, all studies that are sponsored by the pharmaceutical manufacturer. And module 5 then is which is not published, full texts, CSRs, documents, whatever, you know, everything, all materials that you need, and that are confidential, that could be held confidential because it's not published. Okay, but most of it is published, and this is important, because that means, because Germany it's based on a legal structure that you know, there are, with every publication, with every procedure, the number of precedences grows, because the GBA sees itself as a normative organization. So everything that is decided by the GBA is in reference to a former procedure or is anticipating a later procedure. You know, the GBA does not like to correct itself at any point in time. So if they decide something, they think about it in principle. You know, what do we decide here, and can we use what we've decided before, or will this be a reference for other decisions in the future? And this is very, very important to know. And we as a company have a comprehensive database of all procedures that the GBA, of all decisions that the GBA made, and with all the underlying information, with the verbatim protocols, etc., that we extract, so that we really find and look for precedences and can give a prognosis, can anticipate how the GBA will decide and where potential threats are and how we can address them. So again, very, very transparent procedure. The code of procedures is published by the GBA and also by the IQWiG. By the IQWiG also in English. The GBA code of procedures only in an executive summary. So what are they looking? How do they do this? How do they come to the resolution? Well, first of all, they look at endpoints. The endpoints need to be patient relevant, a very, very important term in Germany. What is patient relevant? Patient relevant is everything as an output parameter that can be sensed by the patient. So a lab parameter is a surrogate. You know, no way. The patient needs to sense it. Pain is something. Hospitalization is something. Dialysis, yes, is something. Everything else, radiologic, you know, radiologic images, no. Even not if they have a clinical importance, which is sometimes cynical, you know, as a brain metastasis. If you see a brain metastasis in the MRI scan, you would think as a clinician, wow, this is patient relevant, you know, because the prognosis is different. The GBA says, no, it's not patient relevant unless the patient has symptoms, you know, epilepsy, whatever. But as long as the patient is fine, doesn't know that he or she has a brain metastasis, we don't care. It's not patient relevant. It needs to be validated. The operationalization needs to follow international standards of evidence-based medicine. There must be sensitivity analysis. The studies need to be excellent. The patient-relevant endpoints need to be covered. predefined analyses in the CSR need to be laid out. Obviously, there needs to be a transferability, at least it must be discussed to the German care context. So if you only have a Japanese study, difficult to translate this into the German care context. And obviously the effect size plays a role. So there are different categories: major, considerable, minor, non-quantifiable, no benefit, and lower benefit, which is the worst. That means you're worse than the current standard of care. No benefit, very often. Non-quantifiable, typical for underpowered studies or for orphan studies, because there are not so many patients. And then we have the three categories: major, which is the best, considerable, and minor. Another question is the likelihood, the qualitative certainty of the efficacy data. Best is proof. There is a proof for a major benefit, an indication, a hint, or no hint. It's not mentioned. I have to speed up already. I have the impression I speak fast. Hopefully you get everything. And these are the results. And you see red is the percentage of no benefit through all the procedures. 421 procedures for about a year ago, 11 months ago. 44% no additional benefit. 55% with an additional benefit. If we look at this population of the number of patients, we see that for 76%, 3/4 of all patients covered in the studies, no additional benefit, and less than a fourth, less than a quarter, 23% got an additional benefit. So it's a very hard door, you would say. It's a clear cutoff. It's a very steep funnel, which eliminates a lot of efficacy, and also discovers or busts a lot of myths of the pharmaceutical industry. Say our product is super, it's fantastic, but you see the GBA is pretty hard, and the IQWiC are pretty hard. Most of them actually a lot of them because they did not meet the appropriate comparator. Now, after the GBA resolution, it comes to the negotiation table, and what plays a role there? It's obviously the GBA resolution and the added benefit. So this is the main price anchor. Why? Because if you do not get an additional benefit, so category no additional benefit, the highest price that you can get is the price of the lowest comparator. So if you have a cancer drug, comparator, there are 4 or 5 different comparators. One is chemotherapy, very old, pretty generic. Your annual therapy costs are 60,000 euros. In, let's say, non-small cell lung cancer, comparators are from very PD-1 inhibitors down to chemotherapy. Cisplatin costs 5,000 euros per year. You get no additional benefit. The GBA will say, sorry, your product, 60,000, needs to go down to 5,000, otherwise we won't pay for it. And that means you have to take it off the market, or you reduce your price by 90%. So this is brutal, but this is the most important thing. So you need to get an additional benefit if you want to be higher than the average, than the current standard of care. And as I said, 80% generic penetration. So the average prices, the average costs in most indications, most treatment areas are very, very low in Germany. Then if you have an additional benefit, the comparable drugs are a factor, which is the entire basket of all drugs for the specific indication. So this is the peer group approach. Are we are the most expensive in the basket, or are we somewhere in the middle, or are we probably the cheapest? And then European prices play a role, because Germany does not like to pay a premium, although we have higher prices, we have higher wages, but we don't want to pay a premium. And just to show you how effective this is, left-hand side, that's before the AMNOG. Germany, highest prices in entire Europe, not as high as the US, obviously. US is still the highest in the world. Right-hand side, after AMNOG, each and every red dot is the German price point, and the blue bars is the European price range. And you see that in almost 2/3 or even more of all products, the German price after AMNOG, after the negotiation, is now in the lower than the average, and most of them are in the lower thirds. So this is a very, very effective law. Unfortunately for the pharmaceutical companies, Germany is a price reference country for a lot of countries. You see here what happens, who references to whom, and Germany is referencing to 26 countries worldwide, 19 countries in Europe. So the German price plays a role, and there are bystander effects, collateral effects of other countries. Therefore, German prices play an important role for the business case of the pharmaceutical companies. One exception, if I come to orphan drugs, there are two things, two thresholds that need to be understood. If you have a drug with less than 1 million anticipated turnover within 1 year, because it's very, very seldom, you might have 2 patients, 400,000 euros each, then you don't need to go through this procedure, which is fine by application. If you're above 1 million, then and I have an orphan designation by the EMA, you hand in an orphan dossier, which only needs to present the pivotal studies and where you do not need a comparator. For orphan drugs, an additional benefit is granted by law, which is the privilege for orphans, which also means that you don't have a clear price anchor, which could be an advantage, which could also be a disadvantage. However, if your turnover exceeds 50 million in any given 12 months, you're called again to the GBA with a full procedure, with a non-orphan procedure. So at the latest, you need a study with a head-to-head comparison, which most orphan drug companies don't have, actually, because there's no standard of care. Obviously, if you're first in class, if you're the first for this specific disease, no comparator, no standard of care so far. So this is a difficult situation, also strategically. Some of the companies have done that. There are some recent. If you look, just one word to the results, you see the categories: major, considerable, minor, non-quantifiable, no added benefit, and then you see on the y-axis the rebate of the different procedures. And this is interesting because it shows that there is no clear correlation between the benefit category and the rebate, which means there are a lot of other factors, and one of them is how you negotiate and how you build the business, how you build the value story, and how you make the case for your product. So even if you get a considerable benefit, which is fantastic for an orphan drug, you can end up with here 37% or 20% rebate, which is a huge corridor. Some recent 2-3 words for recent developments. They are so recent that I didn't translate them into English. These are original GBA slides, but the quintessence is in the bottom. We have a new legislation. This is an evolving procedure. Intervention-based registries could become obligatory for high-priced orphan drugs with a limited evidence base. This is now the law. It does not mean that every orphan drug has this threat, but there are clear candidates. ATMPs will have a registry. They will, if they go through the process, the GBA will say, okay, you get an additional benefit by law, which is non-quantifiable, but you have to come back in 2 years and would like to see registry data. Intervention-based registry data, no disease-based. That's not enough. That's not good enough. We want that. And this is a new legislation, and it's another threat and another, obviously, cost containment measure. And the stipulations behind that could significantly limit the access to the market, because the GBA could say, okay, we limit the access, or we limit the prescription to 5 centers. 5 centers that we think are good enough for this orphan disease, and we want a registry with these 5 centers. Nobody else may prescribe the drug, and because nobody will pay for it, only if it's prescribed by these specific centers. And this is, something, a very strategic issue that needs to be discussed and planned for from the very beginning. A second issue is specific for ATMPs. ATMPs now qualify for a quality standard and quality obligations, and which means what is an ATMP? It needs to be, what are the inclusion criteria? It needs to be very expensive. Most gene therapies qualify. You do not know long-term effects, typical. Not many patients, and no evidence, because there are no RCTs. Most of them are historic controls in the study setup, which is typical for gene therapy. You cannot blind it. You know, there might be randomized controlled studies, but it's difficult, and the current standard of care is also very, very difficult. And therefore, additionally, that's the lower part, the success of the therapy depends on circumstances. You only give it once, gene therapies, and product and process quality are very, very important key factors. And therefore, the GBA published a stipulations say, okay, we define who will be qualified, which provider, which prescriber will be qualified. We define structure and process quality measures. You know, which department should do it, which hospital, how does the operation theater look like, do they have the facilities, etc. And we also define how the registry looks like. So this is important to understand, and something that needs to be prepared and planned from a very, very early point in time. Specifically, I mean, if you start thinking about the studies, if you are thinking about the prototype, how are we going to design our studies and get it through the market? That's something that has to be kept in mind, because otherwise you're screwed. If it's too late, and very often, unfortunately, it's too late. It's very, very difficult to comply to this, and this will have a significant impact on the price point. Okay. What are the important factors? As a summary, you need a good and consistent value story to be successful in the German market. You need harmonized strategy and tactics very, very early on through the entire process. Obviously, good study data, convincing study design, and significant and relevant, patient-relevant data. Within the team, it's cross-functional, it's multidisciplinary. You need a good internal cooperation and communication. If you're a small company, fine. Larger companies do have problems with that. You need to manage the stakeholders, understand their role, and manage them systematically. And you need an operational excellence in compiling and writing of the dossier. Okay, one joke, a lame joke. My wife hates me for that, but I think it gives you a little bit of the spirit. Probably you know it. You know what is heaven? Heaven is where the police are British, the cooks are French, the mechanics are German, the lovers Italian, and it's all organized by the Swiss. Now hell is where the police are German, the chefs are British, the mechanics are French, the lovers are Swiss, and it's all organized by the Italians. And the AMNA procedure, market access and pricing and reimbursement in Germany, is a little bit of heaven and it's a little bit of hell. The mechanics are clear, it's transparent, it's very, very reliable, it's very often predictable. But on the other hand, it has some police things. It's clear cost containment, that's the political agenda. And it's sometimes cynical, or it can be cynical, specifically if you negotiate with the insurance companies. Okay, this was the tour de force of my talk. You get the slides through Aurelia. I'm happy to answer questions. I think we have 10 or 12 minutes time, which hopefully is enough. Otherwise, I'm very, very happy if you contact me and with more questions. And as Aurelia said, we can arrange another Q&A session or some more detailed discussion one-on-one. Thank you so far.
Thank you so much, Professor Matthias. And I loved your joke, really. I think, I wonder just for myself where Lithuanians fall into this category. Because that you know, we share some qualities with each of the nations, I think.
Yeah, probably.
Thanks for that. All right, let me see if we have any questions from the audience now. And until then, I actually had the question myself. So you mentioned that the benefit assessment and price negotiations can last 15 months or more. That was the graph that you were showing. I wonder, can you elaborate a little bit more about the costs? So how much would the entire process cost to a company, and maybe also split it in different steps and so on?
Yeah.
There must be a certain cost attached to it, right?
Yeah, sure. I mean, one is the cost to the GBA. You know, they and to the insurances, which is all in somewhere between 40 and 50K. You know, for the if you want to go there early on for an advice meeting, for instance, if you know if you're not quite sure if your study design is okay, or if you plan a study and want to do it in as a conformity with the GBA codes of procedures, you go there and say, okay, these are the endpoints that we like to measure. Do you think they're patient relevant? Will they be accepted later on in the market access procedures? So you pay for that, which is about 10-15,000. And then the price negotiation, it's 4 or 5 appointments, which are also a little bit of a sum. So that's probably it for the authorities. If you don't want to do this yourself, if you need support in writing the dossier, compiling the material, stakeholder management, and price negotiations, because you know everything has to be in German, and you better have support by experience. You need cumulative experience. You know, the average negotiator on the insurance side has around 50 to 60 negotiations as an experience stock. Yeah. And if you go there for the first time, you're completely you have a disadvantage. So if you want support there, it really depends on the effort. So if you know, for a completely outsourced job, let's put it that way, it again also depends on the size of the I mean, how big is your study? How many endpoints, how many subpopulations? Is it 1 study or 4 or 5 studies? All this drives the effort and the need for resources. But I'd say for a complete outsourced job, you're between 400 and 600K, right?
All right.
But there are dossiers that are up to 3,000 pages, so there's more effort. There are orphan dossiers which have 220 pages, you know, with just 1 study and 5 endpoints, much easier. So this is it depends. If you're triggering a larger indication area like multiple sclerosis or whatever, well, a lot of references are around, more effort and more costs, obviously.
Yeah. Okay, thank you so much for that. I don't see any questions, so I think probably people are also getting ready for lunch at this time. Really, thanks a lot for your time and this great overview. I remind to the viewers that they can still register for individual consultations, and I will follow up with you, Professor Schoenemark, and we'll let you know regarding that, the request for individual consultations. And well, I think then we can call it a day for today.
Okay.
So thank you again. And tomorrow with I will be back. We will be back with the second part of the event, where we will talk about German market entry for medical devices and digital health companies. So we split it in this way. And for everybody to whom the topic is relevant, please connect tomorrow at 9. And if I don't see you then, I wish you a great afternoon and success with your German expansion activities. Thank you, Professor, and thank you.
Thank you.
And goodbye.
Take care. Bye-bye.